You're listening to the Primal Happiness Show, a podcast dedicated to helping you thrive in this crazy modern world. Every Tuesday, we explore the nature of how our minds really work, what exactly the human animal requires to thrive, and how we can live happier and more fulfilling lives. If you're new here and haven't yet taken our free class, then there's no better place to get a jump start on reclaiming your primal happiness. It's where we'll guide you step by step through our antidote to today's modern world. Simply head on over to primalhappiness.co/antidote to get the free class and discover how to thrive without having to move to a planet that's not so crazy as ours. But now, your host, Leanne Brook-Tyler.
Hello, my beautiful people. A huge warm welcome back to the show. In today's crazy modern world, men and women are living shallow, disconnected, and unfulfilling lives. So we created the path for those who are ready to reclaim their wildness and actualize their deepest gifts. Before we get into this week's show, I want to ask you something. Is your life lacking real purpose, fulfillment, and meaning? You may not know what it is, but you feel deep down that you're here for something more, something heartfelt and soul-led. Do you lack the deep intimacy and connection that your heart craves and the courage and vulnerability needed to create it? You can no longer ignore your heart's desire to be truly met, felt, and loved. Do you keep finding yourself out of integrity, compromising your values and self-expression for fear of what other people might think or say, whilst the dull ache in your gut reminds you of your deep longing to be a living expression of your true self? If you resonated with any of those questions, then it could be that your soul is calling you to an awakening of your wild sovereignty. And our brand new offering might be exactly right for you. It's called Waking the Wild Sovereign. And it's very much the pinnacle of our work. It's the deepest, most intimate, and most impactful way you can work with us. To discover more, you can go to primalhappiness.co/sovereign. You can also book an exploration call with one of us to see if this is right for you. If this is calling to you, then I am so looking forward to talking to you. And one other thing, as we've done in previous years, to honour the way that humans really need time to hibernate and go inwards in these dark days of winter, Jonathan and I are consciously creating a break over the Christmas period to pause productivity, to rest, as well as being with loved ones and having fun. This means we won't have a show for the next 2 weeks. We'll be back again on the 7th of January. I really hope you can create the holiday that aligns with you and your soul too. And talking of the new year, we've got big changes ahead. A new brand, including a new name, which will include a name of this show as well, new offerings, all of which will be much more aligned to us and will be so much more powerful for you. So more on all of that in the new year. Now onto this week's show. It's with Jewels Wingfield. Jewels is a leading light in helping humanity to make the changes we need to see for a better world. She has 30 years of experience in facilitating deep personal transformation and supporting full expression within loving relationships. In this week's show, Jules and I talked about human wildness, our connection to and communion with the land, and specifically the powerful interlocking between environmental activism and spiritual seeking. This is such a beautifully deep, rich show. Jules is very much the living embodiment of her work and philosophy. I suspect you'll find this incredibly inspiring and also a practical episode. Let's dive in. Hello, Jules. A huge welcome to the show.
Hi, Leanne. Good to meet you.
Lovely to have you here. And I'm feeling a bit jealous at the moment because we're just talking about the sound and kind of whether there was any interruptions. And you described yourself as like, well, no, there's no noise. I'm just here in the middle of the forest. And so I've got forest envy as well right now.
Yeah, so we live up a little forestry track in a clearing. So we are surrounded by 200,000 acres of forest, which is, of course, intentional because the work is all embedded into this environment because nature is the teacher. And that's the kind of the grounding foundation sort of principle of where we're coming from.
Yes. Oh, I love that. And it was very much when we came across you and your work and the way that it is grounded in actual wildness, actual nature, that just felt so aligned to what we're about. I've definitely got forest envy though, where I live surrounded by nature, but a bit of much lighter on the kind of like woods and trees front than I would like. But that sounds just beautiful. So we were talking just before we started the show, and I loved how you described your work. And in fact, there's probably a word that goes deeper than the word work, your being maybe, that has been all around this bridging between environmentalism and spirituality. And as you said the words, I was like, wow, you're talking about this in a way that I've never heard someone talk quite this way before. It really felt like you captured something. And I thought it was also interesting the way you sort of said that's kind of been present to you all your life, which is probably quite different to what I hear most people that I have as guests on. Like they usually sort of found their calling, or I don't know, had a dark night of the soul and then suddenly realized, oh, this is what I'm here to do, or this is what I'm passionate about. So for you, when was that kind of your first inklings or your first awareness of this sense of these two aspects, not just being important, but needing there to be a link between them?
Yes. So there probably was an awareness at this point, but later, as I look back, I realized that's what I was doing. So I think when I was about 5 years old, and my childhood was a very challenging childhood and it had a lot of unhappiness in it. And I remember things like when I was feeling really sad or I was in a lot of pain, and I would be walking down the road and there'd be like a rose bush hanging over the wall in the street, and I would smell the rose. I would just be, oh, I want to smell the rose. I want to smell the rose. And I should have been walking down the road at 5 years old, but there I was. And in the moment that I was smelling that rose, all the pain went away. Just in that moment of receiving in this incredible smell. And there was something about that because the natural world was becoming the soother for my human suffering, for my human pain. And, any time I was struggling or any time I was feeling sad or things were difficult in the house, I would be down the bottom of the garden under the bushes somewhere, making a den and, talking to the beings, talking to the non-physical world. And of course, I just assumed that everyone did this. I didn't think that this was unusual or that I was in some kind of minority. And so I remember going back into the house one day and sort of, just saying to my mum, oh yeah, well, la la la, something that, and just the look on her face, and it was so subtle. She didn't really need to say anything. And I just felt this wave like, oh, there's something wrong with me. That's not meant to happen, or that's not right. And then kind of going into a sort of secret place with it and not wanting to sort of, to talk about that or share it anymore. And in a way, I suppose I carried on doing it, but I did sort of go a little bit into sort of hiding with it and then came back out again in my late teens when I discovered shamanism and drugs and things like that, and just started to sort of explore that world more in different ways. And started to realize that there was a whole world of people who also felt this way. And it was only looking back in my 20s that I started to see this. And I was a really, really full-on activist in my first half of my life, from sort of age 15 to probably my late 30s. I was lying in front of lorries, tying myself to tractors, all of that kind of stuff. And I was quite angry, I was angry at what was happening. And I was one of those activists that would be out there getting really angry and probably delivering my anger to people who really didn't deserve it. But, it was my way of trying to process all this human pain I had. But at the same time, there I was defending our earth. And after sort of 20 years of doing this, I got completely burnt out, as most activists do. because we're not resourced inwardly. And of course, we do an action and there is no guarantee of outcome, but you continue to do it. But of course, that's hard on the heart.
Yes, there's no kind of in-breath to keep the out-breath going.
Exactly. So I got to a place of just feeling total exhaustion, total delusion. Like I was just like, what is the point? It's all done. And what I realized is that I was trying to impart, although I had this deep love for our earth and for the natural world, I was also trying to process my human wound vicariously through this protection of the earth. And it wasn't entirely clean. There was a part of it that was not me seeing that there was inner work that I needed to do. So I had been doing the inner work earlier in my life, but not to the degree that I suddenly had this, oh, right, yeah, no, I really need, I kind of saw that what needs to happen in the shift externally in our world is an inner shift in our consciousness. We can cycle as many plastic bags as we want, and we can wear as many organic cotton clothes as we want, and we can stop flying, and all of these things are super important. But in a way, we're trying to stick a plaster on a gaping, cut, severed artery. Because we're doing those things either from fear or from guilt.
Yes,
and
wow.
Whatever action we do from the place we're doing it from only amplifies that energy. Energy that we're doing it from. So if we're doing it from the energy of fear or the energy of guilt, in a way what we do is magnify the field of fear and guilt.
Yes.
Whereas if we do that action from a shift in our consciousness that says, I do this because I love it, then the action that we do is amplifying the field of love. And it's amplifying the field of consciousness. So, I mean,
can I pause you a moment? Yes. Because I'm just thinking of several examples actually, which I'm seeing show up at similar things, but perhaps different fields.
Yeah.
And how they're mirroring exactly what you say. So I was raised as a vegetarian from birth, and I've been vegan for 23 years. So I know a lot of vegans, and similarly, there's a very similar thing happening. In terms of there's a real sections of that kind of vegan community, if there is a community, which are very coming from like an action taking, like, being all the ways you can do that. And I see that so much, how so much of it is, it's well intended for sure, but it seems as though it's fueled from that place of anger and fear. And I also, again, having been in that community for so long, can also see what you're saying about, because of where it's coming from, because there isn't that, as I was saying, that in-breath, you can kind of literally see the depletion, the kind of draining away of life force, and that could be, actual illness, that could just be, like burned out, as you're saying. And I really see it show up there. It's, and I think the hard thing is when you're locked in that reality, like this is what's going on, this is my only way I could possibly respond to it, it's very hard to see anything outside of that. So it's really interesting to see how you made that journey through that way of being into something else.
Division. It sounds like what you're pointing to is the sense that it creates division. And I think what I want to say is, we do need to celebrate and be in gratitude for everything that we're trying to do. So what I'm speaking to here isn't by way of we're doing it wrong or kind of, criticizing what anyone is doing. We are all doing the best we can. But what we're exploring here, what I'm bringing is the possibility of kind of even better if.
Yes.
If it would be even better if we could make this shift in consciousness so that every choice we make is from love. Because anger, when we come at something with anger is actually an expression of an unmet need. We're only angry because a need isn't met. And it's almost like a flashing light that says, pay attention. If you listen to this, then it's pointing to the fact that there's a need that's not being met. And the need might be for equality in the world, for animal welfare, for better balance of our, of life on Earth. So they're all pointing to needs. But then how we try to meet those needs is where we get into the conflict with each other. We should do that. It's in the strategy, it's in the actions where the conflict is. And usually if you go underneath the strategies that different people are bringing, you'll find quite often that the longings and the needs are the same. But they're the same, they're just different pathways to that. So by doing this inner work, not to abandon the outer work, but by doing the inner work, we can start to create that balance within and become more of a reflection of what's happening in the natural world.
Yes.
So then it's not an enemy, not like they are wrong and, you are wrong and I am right in my choice, but actually finding the places of common ground. And what I began to see once I started going on this journey of much deeper inner work in this shifting consciousness is this divide between these two, what seemingly seems like two separate worlds. So there's what we could sort of broad brushstroke say, the environmental crew and the spiritual seeking crew, and how there's actually a lot of judgment from each of those groups towards the other. And I'm making generalizations here because obviously I know there's many people who bridge both. But if we talk about it in terms of the collective field, there's a lot of judgment, so the people who are out there doing the environmental work, doing action, which is what we could call the outer work, which is so needed because it's like we can't just sit around, on our asses, just sort of hoping, praying that everything will change. So they're out there making these actions, but the shadow sometimes of that, which is what I fell into, was I don't want to look at what's happening inside because it's too painful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to manage my pain by getting busy with the actions and seeing if I can actually sort the stuff out so that I don't have to feel in pain anymore. So then on the other side, we've got the spiritual, what we might call the spiritual questing, which is more the inner work, understanding what is going on at a deeper level here, what's going on in human consciousness, where is there a disconnect from the natural world, where have we gone into being a superior species where Earth and life and planet Earth is simply there as a commodity, So doing that inner work is really, really important. But then the shadow side of that is, don't ask me to dig a hole because I don't want to get mud in my fingernails, and I want to wear white, and it's all kind of, potentially rising above the mud and the earth to something again which can feel quite separate from the embodiment that we are nature. We are earth, air, fire, water, elemental creatures and beings. Spirit isn't something separate from the physicality of life. Spirit is infused in the very fabric of life. So there's shadows to both sides. And what each side is doing is pointing to the shadow on the other side.
Yes.
And going, the environmentalists are going, stop navel gazing while the forests are burning down. Get out there. This isn't the time to meditate. There's a fire to put out.
Yes.
And then the spiritual questers are saying, well, yeah, but you're so angry. You're just doing all this from anger and fear. How's that going to change anything? That's just sticking a plaster on a severed artery. So I've just, all my life I've just been, and I feel like I have sort of been bridging both of these worlds and feeling the shadow in both of them and the kind of the conflict between them. And, that they profoundly and utterly need each other. That the outer and the inner cannot be done separate from the other. Like we have to do both as a twin trail. They are like lovers entwined together. One cannot be done successfully, for want of a better word, without the other. And each of us is going to feel called more to one or the other, and that's okay. It's not that each of us has to equally be doing both. It's good that we each lean into whichever one we feel more called to do. And there's just, who knows what that calling is, our astrological configuration, our birth story, our human trauma, our whatever. But if whichever one we lean into, to be in a conscious and co-creative, interdependent relationship with the other, so that there's support happening on both sides, then I think we have a really powerful model for going forwards.
Oh, I love that. And I really love what you said there at the end as well. The fact that this isn't necessarily about, okay, the right way is to do both equally. There's likely to be a leaning that's just natural to you. I mean, who knows why, as you say. And I can very much see how that's shown up for me, that I naturally probably am. I lean more to the kind of spiritual, trying to sort of understand things, looking at it from a kind of, very heady perspective. And what I will say is that's actually made, the more I focus in on my body and the land, even though that's probably not my natural weighting, it's made it like so much more rewarding, because I'm not naturally drawn to be in my body. The real conscious work I've done over the years to bring my energy and my awareness into my body, to be kind of in this world, in the wildness, have been so rewarding, because they're kind of like, for me, they're not like a given. And so, and I suspect the same's true the other way around, but I love that you said that.
Yeah.
Wow. So for assuming most of our listeners are likely to be somewhere in one of those two movements, and some are going to definitely have a sense of both. It's a conscious listenership, and like, because of the nature of the show, it is really about bridging the two, as your work is. If someone's hearing this and feeling like they might want to embrace more of the other side of, whether if they're already on the kind of environmental side, more of the spiritual, vice versa, what would you suggest? What have you seen is fruitful paths to doing so?
It's really simple. Just get involved in the things that are happening on the other side that you don't naturally lean to. So if you more naturally lean to the inner work and the meditation and the kind of going in and looking at our human wound, because what I see in the old model of therapy is you go and you sit in a room with one person. Often that room might have a plant in it if you're lucky. It might have a window in it if you're lucky, with a view outside to nature. But it isn't fundamentally rooted in the understanding that we are nature, that we are cyclical beings, that we are feral beings. It's like we've come to this, we're civilized beings now, and we have controlled bacteria, and we have controlled disease, and we have controlled all the animals that threaten our very existence, and we have controlled our environment. And then we go into looking at our human wounds, but we look at them from a place of separation, like only another human being sitting in front of us helping us is the thing that will help. And of course, it's massively helpful. Let's not kind of say that it isn't. But outside of the context of understanding that we are embedded within a web of life, it only goes so far. And it's still a model of separateness. It's still a model of human beings basically just need to come back to, it's like the whole shadow of the enlightenment movement or the self-awakening movement is, I am going for my enlightenment. When actually teachings at root are based on the understanding that awakening happens because we dissolve from duality in a sense of separateness into the understanding that we are one with everything.
Yeah.
So there's something about coming out of the isolation. A lot of the work I do is in group context. I do some one-to-one work, but not so much, because and it's in group context, and it's embedded within nature. So we have a beautiful earth lodge here, which is like built into the side of the hill, and it has a fire and it's got a low roof. It's a really old style Neolithic building. And by simply being in there with the fire on a sheepskin, touching the earth, with the elements so close to us, even though we're going deeply inside in how we're sitting in there, and yes, we're passing a talking piece round and we're spiraling down as we share what's happening in our inner landscape. Because we're with the elements so intimately, we feel how they're supporting us, and it helps us to feel in our body that more feral, kind of embedded experience of what it is to be human within our elemental existence, which is very different to sitting in a clinical room with two lovely chairs with beautiful white covers on them and a hoovered carpet. Nothing wrong with any of those things, but it's like, how do we come back to this embedment? Because the human wound is fundamentally what's causing the issue on planet Earth. I mean, we know that. So we need to look at the human wound, but it's like the way we've been looking at the human wound is still from the model of separation from the natural world.
Oh, yes, you've said that so beautifully. Yes, we're looking at the wound from shadow. And so, how do you move past that? I love that. And you made about 4 different things pop into my head at once. I was just thinking, that's when I have guests on the show that have had a history of some description or other with shamanism, I really notice how that's one of the few types of spirituality that really includes this embedding in nature. And it's kind of, it's not even, you can't separate it. It's just, they come together so clearly. And and I was also thinking, and I complete everything you said, I really agree with. And I think this is a challenge I see all the time with our work. Just as an example, I've got a course I'm running at the moment called Waking the Wild Feminine, and we circled last night, but it's online, so we did it via Zoom. And I bring in as many of the elements that you're talking about, and yet there is this there's a point where you aren't sitting in that gorgeous womb-like earthy environment that you described. And I'm really present to that. There's a very real cost of that not being the case.
Well, some people, I mean, we're all really different, but some of us through that medium can absolutely connect with the non-physical world. So for people like that, it doesn't really matter if you do it online, if you do it in the room, if you do it, because they can feel the energies. Some of us can feel those energies moving through the etheric field. Others of us aren't so in touch with that. I think we can all feel it. It's just that we haven't necessarily been shown the pathways, or we've lost touch with how to do that. But it is coming back to this basic understanding that spirit, or the mystery, or that is in the non-physical, is infused literally within every cell of life, everything that's there, and infused in the non-physical. And you were speaking about shamanism there. And of course, shamanism is like the oldest spiritual spiritual path, if you like, for want of a better way of saying it, that we've had on planet Earth. And what I see is that all around the world over thousands of years, these traditional earth-based spiritualities have been completely decimated and trashed. And England has been one of the worst to be decimated and trashed for that. Our Celtic traditions, our pagan Neolithic history is so difficult to access, which I think is why we as British people keep going all around the world and sort of taking all these different cultures, spirituality, because we're hungry for earth-based spirituality. We're hungry to experience life in this way, but we can't find it in our own land. We can't find it in our own history so easily unless we have that access, and we can kind of tap into that ancestral patterning, and we can read nature, and we can read it through our bodies. If we're women, we can read it through our wombs. And I've got a bit of a passion. I'm on a bit of a, the reason that I bought this land here in England, because I've traveled all over the world and thought, where's my land? Where do I want to be? Where's the land calling me? And I went all around the world and I came back to England because my body, the cells in my body, my DNA, my ancestors' kind of cellular memory recognizes something of this land, recognizes something in the history. And I've got a bit of a passion for bringing back our own indigenous teachings. So we honor and respect everything that that is being offered, we're either stealing or taking actually, or maybe generously being offered with blessing from other cultures. And it's something about actually, let's reclaim ours from this land. Let's reclaim ours. And actually, it is here in the land. It's especially for women. Women have wombs, and wombs are for more than making babies, which is an incredible thing in itself. But we, through womb consciousness, through this connection, because it's a taproot, like a tree root, straight into the earth, straight into the mystery, because the womb is a place of death and rebirth. So it's connected to life and death. It can be connected to the very physical embodiment of this life, and it can also connect with the non-physical collective sense of life going back through history. So through that, and just through even if we haven't got a womb, we can sit in nature, we can open our bodies, we can open our psyches to literally receive information. I mean, all the work that we do here is rooted in the wheel of life. And most people will recognize the wheel of life terminology from, say, Native American, that kind of thing, or South American. But actually, the wheel of life exists in all indigenous spiritual paths. And the wheel of life here has simply been shown to me over 25 years. It's like by all the times of sitting in nature, of all the times being willing to just open myself to the non-physical world and just be shown everything of this land. I mean, where we are here in the Forest of Dean, the land is really ancient and it's quite traumatized at the first layer if we go back through sort of last 5 generations because of all the mining. But if we go back past that, we start to really tap in to the wisdom of the land and the ancientness of the land and what has happened here and what the land is actually asking for. So I think when I was about 16, I had this really strong calling to be guardian of a piece of land and to work with that piece of land and to be willing to listen to that piece of land, to see what does it want to speak through me. So from my human self, it's like, yes, I'm the teacher and I've got all this wisdom and da. But actually, it's the land that's speaking through me. It's the mystery that is speaking through me. And I can feel the moments when that's happening. And I can feel the moments when I'm just fumbling around from my human personality, trying to kind of sound clever. I can feel when the land is speaking through me. And that's when we go into this ceremonial space. And we all feel it. Something in the energy of the field changes and the land changes. It's like I've watched this land. We've been here for nearly 8 years now, which is very, very short in terms of being in relationship with a piece of land. I mean, I'd like it to be thousands of years and maybe it will after I've gone, but 8 years. But even in 8 years, I feel like only now is she starting to show me things that I was not ready to see before, that she's now saying, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And things that are emerging from the land that weren't here before that I didn't plant. I was like, well, where have they come from? So, yeah, it's the passion I have to reclaim our own indigenous selves. And this movement of people, whether we're the environmentalists or the spiritual thrill seekers, we are the indigenous tribe that we keep romanticizing from our past, which in some ways was not that romantic. They were all killing each other and doing God knows what, even though there was some amazing stuff too. We can glorify it and sort of make it sound glamorous. But actually we are trying to reclaim that and this sense of belonging that we all so hunger for, like so deeply. I think one of the deepest human wounds that we experience is this disconnect from a sense of belonging, whether that's belonging to our family, human family, extended human family that's embedded within a village, or that belonging from the separation from nature and wanting to come back to feel ourselves embedded in nature. And this separation, this way of living in isolation, of families living in isolation. We were meant, Francis Weller talks about this beautifully, who does the grief work. He says, when we were born, we were meant to be born into a village and be met by 40 pairs of eyes and 40 pairs of arms, all saying, welcome, we're so glad you're here. And that we feel our place in that village. We don't have to earn it, and we don't have to question whether we're welcome. When we sit in circles, so often we have that human wounded voice that says, oh, I'm not welcome here. I'm the outsider. I don't belong. I don't know if everyone likes me. I don't believe that was ever true. There was never a word for I in these times. Like if someone said, how are you? You wouldn't say, I'm fine. You'd say, my village is well. The land is well. The sun came up. You wouldn't say, my child is sick. You'd say, our village is sick. Because they understood for the child to be well, the village is dependent on the wellness of the village, because we're each going to express different aspects of the whole. So this belonging is so fundamental. And how do we create a sense of belonging within the context of our modern world? And I do believe we can, but it takes a little creativity, because, of course, we're not all going to go back to living in the woods and beating drums all day long and lighting fires and killing venison. It's not about that. Some of us might want to do that. We're doing that, but it's not a requirement. But it is a requirement to find our sense of belonging and to feel ourselves embedded somehow within a village, within the web of life, so that we are resourced to do what we do in the world and bring our calling and bring our gift to the world. I really believe that our deepest longing is to bring our gifts. It's not what can we get. I think the hurting that we're feeling is because there isn't space for us to bring our gift, because we're all too busy trying to make enough pennies to rub together to pay a mortgage and feed our children.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And I think that we feel deeply sad, most of us, that we can't bring our gift, to the point we don't even know what the gift is. It's like, I haven't got anything to offer. I haven't got anything to offer. When I look at the model of society and what they say I should or shouldn't be, I don't fit into any of that. So the voice that's so quiet inside of, what is it that I love? What is it that I truly, truly love? It's not about sacrificing ourselves to the cause. It's about receiving. It is that in-breath. It's like the whole fundamental suffering is that we're not taking the in-breath, that we're not receiving, like deeply receiving. I don't mean taking for our own personal gain.
Yes.
But how we see that is like, oh, you're asking me to sacrifice myself. And that doesn't work either, because we're all burnt out. But it's only a sacrifice if we're operating as an isolated unit.
Yes.
If we're operating and we're embedded within a sense of belonging and we're nourished and fed by the village and by the world around us and by spirit itself guiding us, nothing that we do is going to deplete us. It's going to fill us. It's going to enliven us. It's going to strengthen us. So much of the work that we do here is about giving people a transmission, almost like an embodied experience of what it feels like to belong, of what it feels like to feel resourced, to feel, but not because we're pampering them necessarily, but because we're bringing them into that deep experience of interconnectedness. And that they go away feeling resourced, and it's like, wow, how can I create this in my life?
Yes. Oh, I love that. That word you just used there, pamper, really reminded me of conversations we were having last night in Circle. And the topic we were talking about was cycles. So any kind of wild cycles, but a lot of the conversation was about the menstrual cycle. And it was really interesting how how many layers this sense of kind of indulgence or pampering showed up, this kind of wound of, oh, I shouldn't have this, or I can't ask for that. And so a couple of women actually were having these kind of really busy days. We're thinking, oh, it's an indulgence to kind of go and sit in circle and even talk about these things, and kind of manage to make it through that layer of resistance to the nourishment of sitting together. And then the next layer is where we were sharing kind of the way that we may create rituals or ways of being around our cycle. And maybe, for example, taking that first day of our bleed to kind of go inwards and to rest. And again, it shows up like that to be so indulgent. And it's so interesting how these kind of actually very basic ways of allowing ourselves to be held by the cycle, be held by the community, be held by the earth, are seen as this kind of indulgence, this pampering, rather than this, like, as you say, this nourishing way of taking the in-breath so that we can take the out-breath.
Absolutely. And it comes back to what we often, what the core of the map that we work with is working with the core beliefs that we've developed from a very young age, based on the input that we got given, conditions of worth, conditions of love. I will love you if, you are worthy if you behave this way or don't do that. And it's very much from the I shouldn't have any needs. That's the fundamental programming we've had. I shouldn't have any needs. And then I wonder why I'm feeling burnt out and exhausted when I get to 35. So how can we be an effective channel for nature or bring our gift and our calling into the world if we're under-resourced? It's like asking a child to go to school and learn algebra when it hasn't had a good night's sleep and it hasn't had a decent breakfast.
Yes, completely.
Those fundamental things have to be met. And because we're so isolated, it feels like in order to meet them, I have to push everybody away because people around me, it's the feeling they're constantly pulling on me, asking me for things. I don't know how to say no. So I need to push them all away, come back into my little isolation tank and resource myself. And the tragedy is, it kind of works up to a point, but actually it's not true nourishment because it's still in the model of separation.
Yes.
So that deep personal inner work around getting clear what our needs are, being able to receive on every level, and being able to say no is so important, is so fundamental important. And it might be that for a lot of us, we don't get past that in this lifetime, but that's the work that we're doing for our future ancestors. This may feel like we can do that work and we've got a bit extra to bring as well. And that's brilliant. But we need to take the judgment out of it, because otherwise we just go back into the burning martyr syndrome of the old paradigm of women, sort of sacrificial cross on our back and, I must not have needs tattooed on our foreheads. It doesn't work. And women have such a gift because, as you're saying, we are cyclical. Our wombs point us to our cyclical nature. Life is cyclical. The universe is cyclical. Everything is cyclical. Yet the way we view life now as human beings is we'll just have spring and summer, thank you very much. We don't really like autumn and winter. So we'll just eliminate that. We'll just pretend it doesn't exist. We'll manipulate crops. We'll do genetic modification. We'll find ways of growing food all year round. But nature understands that spring and summer only happen because of what has happened in winter, because the soil has been composted, because the leaves and the seeds have all broken down and gone back into making earth, which is the very thing that life needs to grow from. Like the next shoot comes from that seed, from the shell that broke down to make the compost, is what is going to make that next cycle of life flourish or not. So in that way, what we do at the beginning of a cycle impacts how that cycle plays out.
Yes.
We know that the way we are birthed impacts the way our life plays out. The way we start our day impacts the way that day plays out. The way we begin our monthly menstrual cycle impacts the way that cycle plays out. So we know that menopause, the way we do menopause, lays the ground for the next half of our life. But even as women, we've been taught, like, just be in spring and summer, just be maidens and mothers, don't be crones and old women, because that doesn't count.
Yes.
And then we get to the sexuality. Let's not even.
I think you might need to come back and do a part two. We haven't had a chance to get into that. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Because that is my passion, obviously, around sexuality. But just to stay with this cyclical aspect, because this is relevant to men and women, we need to listen and mirror, because we are mirrors of this cyclical nature happening out there. And if we don't allow ourselves autumn and winter, we literally do not have a summer, a spring and a summer in us. And that's how when I'm working with women, I reframe it, especially when we're working with the menstrual cycle, but even if we're working with our life cycles, the value, the effectiveness of us as women in the spring and the summer of our monthly cycle is directly dependent on how well we do autumn and winter in our monthly cycle. And that's a reframe of giving women permission to do radical rest, which is the deepest spiritual practice for the feminine, is conscious bleeding. Something happens when our blood is offered in a direct line to the earth without going through a tampon or through another object. And it actually creates a bioresonetic circuit in us with the earth. And they've done lots of research now with especially young girls who suffer from anxiety and depression. And having them put their blood straight into the earth is actually changing their hormonal configuration. It's actually having a direct effect.
Goodness. Yeah. It's a practice that I do, but I had no idea of that research. That's fascinating. If you can send that over to me afterwards, I'll add that to the show notes. That's just amazing.
Anyway, let's not go to sexuality and all of that. Let's stay on topic. We'll do another podcast for that. So coming back to just this sense of belonging and this permission for us to be in winter. I mean, when it's winter, I'm sitting here now, and it's still kind of a bit dark outside. It's not that light, even though it's 11 a.m. where we are in the UK. But we're hitting the winter solstice with, if we're looking at the Celtic wheel of life, this is Samhain, the 31st of October, is the true ending of the year. And it means death. The whole Halloween thing and the skulls and the bones, it's all pointing to this ancient honoring of indigenous spirituality, earth-based spirituality that points to the ending of the year. So this Samhain, which is the ending of the year, and then between Samhain and the winter solstice, which is 6 weeks, and it's following the solar cycle, is the time of death. This is the time we're meant to be sitting by a fire, eating the nuts that we've harvested, reflecting deeply, inwardly on the year that has been. And because of this darkness and because it's pointing to the energy of death, it means the veils between worlds are thinner, so we can access this stuff easier. We can go to the other side. We can connect with the wisdoms that are there and help them with our dreams going forwards, as well as help with the composting of letting things go that no longer serve us. So the practices that we always are kind of encouraging and teaching at this time of year are the ones that are about deep, what we call composting, which is literally letting go of what does not serve us, offering it back to the earth, letting it become fertile soil for new life to grow, and allowing ourselves to vision without going, but I don't know how to do that. It's like so often we don't let ourselves dream and vision because we can't see a way to actualize it.
Yes.
But this time of dreaming, you're not meant to be figuring out how and if it's possible, but it's to allow your consciousness to expand into the dream space. A seed from an oak tree isn't sitting under the ground going, well, I'm not going to let myself begin to grow because I cannot possibly see how I could be as big as an oak tree. It doesn't. It's just in this experience of I'm a seed and here's a shoot. And let's see what happens if I bring myself above the earth. And let's see what happens if I receive the sunlight. It's not, trashing it all because it can't see the potential.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That feels, I see both these two different things show up, and I think they're sort of versions of each other. So One is where if I'm talking to a client, or it could be anyone, about, I don't know, going inwards and listening to their body or listening to intuition, and there's a sense of, oh, I don't want to, because I don't want to hear what's said, because then I might need to take action. That's kind of one way it shows up. The other is exactly as you're saying, which is if I have a sense of kind of this vision, I'm then going to be really overwhelmed and have to know how I'm going to do it. And I'm already thinking about how I'm going to do it. And then that makes me want to close it all down. And I just love what you're saying. The invitation there is just to allow whatever is to be shown with no kind of like immediate, like, okay, how could I make this happen? Oh, I can't. I'm too overwhelmed by it. Gorgeous.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. To allow the visioning to expand. This is the element of air. Expand our consciousness to be as vast as the cosmos itself, of every star, and to just let our bodies almost be a vessel for that, so that something can come through and land in our consciousness, land in the kind of ancestral DNA of us. And when I speak about the ancestors, I don't just mean the human line. Like, our ancestors is the natural world. They are the stars, the moon, the sun, the water. And it goes backwards and forwards. So everything we do is in service to what's going forwards and healing what has gone behind that needs healing, or that we can take inspiration from.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
So the work in that way is embedded in deep time. It's not just what we're doing right now,
Beautiful. So we are out of time and didn't get a chance to get onto sexuality, but let's come back and do a part 2 on that. Is there anything you'd like to say, just in a kind of parting, that you feel would be a useful thing to leave listeners with?
Yeah, I mean, as a beautiful, really simple practice that's so obvious that we can kind of almost overlook it, that we can do, especially if you live in a warmer climate. At the moment, it's quite cold to do it here, but to spend 15 minutes of every day with your feet barefoot on the ground, or some part of your bare skin against the earth, because there's actually a bioenergetic circuitry that happens when we do this that really helps to downregulate our nervous system, call us into alignment, help us to feel more balanced. And it's such a simple and easy thing to do. Even the fact that we wear shoes all the time now, we're already like slightly detached from that, getting that electrical circuitry rooted into our bodies. So that's, try it for 1 month and see what you notice.
Oh,
yeah. And and just to say, of course, we've got, I'm sure you'll speak about that after, but we've got the program of workshops that are here, and all, pretty much all the workshops we do are here at Earth Heart, this place where I'm now guardian of this land, because I'm working with the land. And so when people come here, then they're getting the teachings in all the elements, in all the directions. They're getting the teachings directly from the land, as well as what's coming through me. And that's really potent. So an invitation to come and to join us.
Gorgeous. Where's the best place to find out? Your website or?
Just go to the website, jewelswingfield.com. It's all on there. There's tons of information. Get in touch. We've got a really great team who can, respond to emails and stuff like that. And they'll get passed to me if needs be, and that kind of stuff.
Wonderful. Well, for now, thank you so much. It would be lovely to have you back and really dig into sexuality and how that relates to all of this. But that was just beautiful. Thank you so much, Jules.
Thanks, Leanne. Good to speak.
Oh, wow. What a deeply stirring conversation that was. When we're focusing mainly on environmentalism, or indeed other forms of activism, without spirituality, or vice versa, we're missing out on the power that comes from the interlocking of the two, the inner work and the outer work. Belonging to a community and your environment are not indulgent, they're not in luxuries, they're deeply necessary in-breaths that allow you to give your gifts in a way that's nourishing to you and to the world. Go and spend 15 minutes with your bare skin against the earth every day. Do this for a month and see the difference it makes. If you'd like to get the notes and links for everything we spoke about this week, hop on over to the show notes, and they're at primalhappiness.co/episode 263. if you're feeling the call to waking the wild sovereign, you can go along to primalhappiness.co/sovereign to discover more and to book an exploration call with one of us to see if this is right for you. And just to remind you, we're now taking a break over the Christmas period and won't be back with an episode until the 7th of January. If you don't want to miss out on next week's episode, head on over to Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, or your Android or iOS app of choice and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll get each episode delivered straight to your device as soon as it's released. Thank you so much for listening. You've been wonderful. Catch you in the new year.